I fondly remember a student I worked with years ago. Let's call him Marcos. Marcos was a smart and well spoken kid, funny and full of personality. He was truly likable, but he was always getting into trouble. His attitude from day to day was generally decent, not typically disrespectful or angry, nothing like that. But he simply couldn't stay focused and rarely completed any schoolwork. He would often disrupt class with off topic and many times off color jokes. He loved playing the role of the class clown. Do you know a Marcos? We tried everything: intervention meetings, disciplinary actions, even bribery. Nothing stuck. He would change for a day or two, but eventually he'd just fall back into his disruptive behavior. Finally, in a quiet one on one moment, Marcos opened up to me. He said, "Mr. Martinez, I'm just not meant to be successful. People like me don't graduate or go to college. Besides, everyone thinks I'm a lost cause anyway. So why even try?" And there it was, the limiting belief. His belief that he was a lost cause and destined for failure shaped his personal sense of value and squashed his hope. Ultimately, it all showed up in his behavior. Welcome back to Mr. Martinez's Mindset Messages. I'm Mr. Martinez, and I want to thank you for joining me here today. In today's episode, we're going to start unpacking the B in the ABC's framework. Belief determines behavior. We're going to talk about what a belief is and how beliefs work, where beliefs come from, and why someone would want to change their beliefs. There's a lot to unpack, so today's episode will be part 1 of 2. Let's jump into it. In the last episode, we talked about how our attitude determines our action. We compared our attitude to the lens on a digital camera. Like a lens, our attitude or our way of thinking shapes how we see and perceive ourselves and others, as well as the world around us. And just like the lens on a camera, our attitude can be pretty easily changed. Building on this analogy, if our attitude is like a lens, then our beliefs are like the internal firmware of the camera body. The firmware doesn't control what the camera sees. It determines how what it sees gets processed, how it interprets what it's pointed at. In the end, the firmware defines the camera's capabilities and its limitations. At first glance, attitudes and beliefs seem like the same thing. Both of them are internal components that can inform and influence the way we act and behave, but they operate at different levels. A belief is a strongly held conviction about someone, something, or somewhere that is accepted as true, even if it isn't true. Now, let that sink in. A belief doesn't have to be factual to be functional. If it's accepted as true, it drives behavior. Like the firmware in a digital camera, beliefs are hardwired and programmed into our personal operating system. They provide the capabilities and limitations for how we think and make decisions. In her highly regarded work on mindset, Carol Dweck said, "Beliefs are the key to motivation. They can empower or disempower capabilities and limitations." So, if beliefs shape motivation and create boundaries, where do they come from? Let's break it down. This is a bit simplified, but beliefs can be formed, taught, or caught. They're formed through personal experiences, both the good and the painful. They can be taught by authority figures like parents, teachers, or leaders. Or beliefs can be caught. By that I mean they can be absorbed from what we see what we hear, and what we feel in our environment, even when no one says it out loud. Over time, this experiential messaging layers up, settles in, and shows out, not just in how we think, but in how we live. So, an important distinction here is that while an attitude is a way of thinking, a belief is a way of living. Research from the National Scientific Council on the Developing Child confirms that repeated emotional experiences, especially in early childhood, literally can shape brain architecture and long-term belief systems. Your beliefs become your thoughts become your words, and your words become your actions. This proverbial statement, often attributed to Mahatma Gandhi, kind of goes along with another way I have taught this concept over the years. It's another proverbial statement commonly attributed to Charles Reed. Sow a thought, reap an action. Sow an action, reap a behavior. Sow a behavior, reap a lifestyle. Sow a lifestyle, reap a destiny. So, with this basic understanding of what beliefs are and how we get them, we can see pretty clearly that our beliefs are the driving force behind our motivation, mindset, and movement. So, it probably comes as no surprise that some beliefs can help us while others hold us back. And that raises an important question. Why would someone want to change the way they believe? That's a great question, and honestly, there could be hundreds of reasons, but really, all it takes is one. So why change? Here are 5 good reasons. People may want to change a belief because they recognize, first, that it's limiting their potential. Beliefs shape our sense of what's possible. If, like Marcos from the opening story, someone believes, I'm not smart enough, or people like me don't succeed, that belief becomes a ceiling. But when they begin to believe, I can learn, or my past doesn't define me, everything can change. A second reason people may want to change a belief is that it's rooted in pain, not truth. Some beliefs are formed in moments of trauma, rejection, or failure. They feel true because they've been reinforced over time, but they're not based in truth. When a young person begins to question whether those internalized messages are valid, the desire to change can emerge. What if I'm not broken? What if I am worthy? Dorothy Briggs said, children are not born with low self-esteem, they learn it. This understanding is backed by research showing that adverse experiences often become internalized as shame-based beliefs. And a third reason that some people might want to change their belief is that it no longer aligns with who they're becoming. As people grow, they outgrow. A belief that once helped them survive or make sense of the world may become toxic or outdated. When their current self and their future self are in conflict, that inner tension becomes a catalyst for change. Motivational speaker and change guru Tony Robbins has said, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. The quote I often use to support this idea is, you will only change what you can no longer tolerate. Reason number 4 that someone might want to change a belief is that it's producing behaviors they don't like. When someone becomes aware of repeated patterns of behavior, like, being reactive, self-sabotage, quitting too early, they may stop and ask, why do I keep doing this? And often that question or questions like it can lead back to a belief that's running in the background. And once that belief is named, it can be changed. And reason number 5 that someone might want to change a belief is that it conflicts with what they now know to be true. Sometimes people learn new truths about themselves, others, or the world that conflict with their existing belief system. That conflict creates discomfort, and that discomfort can lead to growth. Changing a belief becomes a way to bring integrity and alignment back into their lives. So, to summarize these 5 reasons, renowned psychologist and psychoanalyst Carl Jung believed, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. When people become aware that a belief is limiting, painful, or no longer true, that's where change begins. It often starts with discontentment, leading to an awakening. Then, guided by insight, it can take root in a desire for freedom, for growth, or for healing. That's when transformation begins, not with steps in some sort of behavior modification program, but with awareness. First comes the discomfort, then the insight, and finally the choice to grow. In the next video, we're going to explore what it takes to change beliefs. Not overnight, not perfectly, but intentionally and with purpose. We'll also revisit Marcos and catch up with how he's doing these days. Before I sign off, I'd like to close with this. What's one belief, true or false, that you've carried for a long time and recently began to question? Maybe it's time for change. If you're up to it, share your story in the comments below. You never know. Someone in our community could be encouraged by your breakthrough. If you've made it this far and stuck around to the end, I want to thank you. I hope that you'll join me in the next video. Until then, much love, much respect, peace.